Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Katan, we're going to talk about the latest here between Russia and Ukraine. A couple developments there, including some of the presidents talking with the quote-unquote coalition of the willing. So we'll have those details. Also the latest between Israel and Hamas. It was a little bit quieted down for a minute, but things are heating back up. And also then we have India coming out with a pretty big military spending bill here, the budget rather, military budget for this coming year. So they're beefing up their military. So those stories and more, but first, a new recall. This time, companies like Ken's Hens and Black Sheep are recalling 6 million eggs. Now, we know what we know for sure is that the eggs were distributed across Arkansas, Missouri, and Texas between July 9th and September 17th. But there could be more that were repackaged and distributed to other states, according to the FDA.
Wow, well, the eggs have been found to be contaminated with salmonella. Well, symptoms that can arise from being infected with the bacteria are diarrhea, fever, and stomach cramps. Now, if you have any of those recalled eggs, it's best to either throw them away or return them to the store for a refund. But also make sure you sanitize any surfaces that could have come in contact with the eggs or your handling of them.
Well, people are wondering if this will impact the price of eggs more than they have been already. Now, the answer is it's not likely to be as bad as with the bird flu because this is a problem directly with the eggs, not the chickens who lay them.
Well, drug makers are pushing for a new deal to lower the cost of a revolutionary drug that reduces the risk of HIV infection by more than 99.9%. Well, if the deal goes through, lenacapavir will be made available to low and middle income counties, by 2027.
Well, lenacapavir's developer, Gilead Sciences, normally charge around $28,000 for 1 year's supply of the drug. But charities like the Gates Foundation are planning to assist 2 different drug makers in India who will develop their own generic versions of the HIV prevention drug. Now, the cost to one patient, just remember, the previous one was $28,000, right, but the cost to one patient for a year's worth of this generic brand will be just $40.
Wow, that just goes to show how much profit there actually is in drug manufacturing. Well, Peru's new president has declared his first state of emergency for 30 days to fight back against the country's problem with crime. In the capital of Lima, which has a population of 10 million people, the people there are not convinced that the president's call for a crackdown will amount to anything. We'll take a look at this video, which shows why people are unsure if his plan will help.
A joint task force of army and municipal agents deploying under police control. That's how the government plans to enforce a 30-day state of emergency in the capital, Lima, a city of more than 10 million people, most of whom are demanding that the government tackle crime. Transport workers have been targeted for extortion. More than 1,200 people have been murdered this year, many for not paying extortion demands. Maritza Aguirre hopes measures are taken for the protection of children, but didn't see any changes on the first day of the emergency.
As you can see, there are no police, no security, and today is the first day of the state of emergency. It's just like any other day.
Few police were seen here in Lima's most populous and violent district of San Juan de Lurigancho. But President Jose Geri was here. With less than 2 weeks in office, he's trying to portray himself as a hands-on leader visiting Peru's largest prison. On Wednesday, he went into a cell, jeans and sleeves rolled up, to collect what appear to be illegal items. Critics say it's an effort to clean up an image shadowed by investigations for embezzlement, corruption, and sexual abuse, all of which he denies. The new president has also ordered security forces to be tough on criminals. But as a legislator, he voted to pass 8 laws that critics say favored organized crime. Along with the other accusations against him, that's likely to make his image difficult to change. His predecessor, Dina Boluarte, declared 10 states of emergency in less than 3 years. Critics say without any success. That's why Cristian Hurtado doesn't trust the government's plan.
For me, no. Day or night, it's always the same situation. They kill people, assault women, kill drivers, break into stores. It doesn't matter when or where. As long as Peru doesn't do something, crime will always continue.
Well, Katana, as we heard there, testimony from some of the residents that are saying it just seemed like it was like any other day, that the first day of what was supposed to be the crackdown, they're expecting to see more police force and so forth out on the street, but it's just like any other day, and that's why many are feeling it's not going to be any different. Right. Well, India is planning a huge spending budget of 797,000 crore rupees, or on its military defense. Now, that's a whopping $9 billion in U.S. dollars. India's Defense Acquisition Council, or the DAC, the top decision-making body for military spending, decided which weapons to buy and how much they could allocate for the purchases.
That's right. There are 3 main weapons India's army will be getting. Now let's take a look at each one. Well, the first item on the list is the NAG Mk2 anti-tank missile. Now, this is produced in India. They are putting in an order for over 2,000 of these missiles. Next is the ground-based mobile ELINT system. Each one is an individual intelligence hub set up on a truck, and they are capable of tracking and identifying enemy assets. And lastly, for the Army, they will be purchasing what are called high mobility vehicles, which are, generally speaking, a military Humvee.
Well, but that isn't where it stops. India's Navy is also going to benefit by getting landing dock platforms. Now, these are ships that can carry land equipment and soldiers and can easily drop them off in a war zone. Now, these will be a game changer for India. Now, besides these docking platforms, the Navy will receive 30-millimeter naval guns and advanced lightweight torpedoes, as well as smart ammo for their 76-millimeter super rapid guns.
Finally, the India Air Force was not forgotten. A collaborative long-range target saturation, or CLRTS-DS for short, but better known as drone swarms. Now, this is something else they'll be getting. It's a hunting pack in the sky with a range of over 1,000 kilometers. Now, they can navigate and find their targets independently and launch a coordinated suicide attack. Now, besides this high-tech advancement, India's Air Force will also replenish its stock of S-400 missiles from Russia.
Well, as we have reported on in the past, there have already been multiple U.S. strikes on boats in the Pacific and Caribbean waters. But the latest comes with the news that there were 2 survivors. Now, Navy official reported that U.S. Navy helicopters were overhead and a boat picked them up, where they remain now in U.S. custody.
And President Donald Trump elaborated on the strike, saying, quote, "We attacked a submarine, and that was a drug-carrying submarine built specifically for the transportation of massive amounts of drugs. Just so you understand, this was not an innocent group of people. I don't know too many people that have submarines," end quote. Well, he was referencing what they call semi-submersibles, which cartels often use to do their smuggling. Now, regardless, This is the 6th boat the United States has hit in international waters, and we know of 29 deaths resulting from those strikes.
Well, but some question if what the White House is doing is actually legal. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio added to the president's comments saying, quote, "We're undertaking these operations against narco terrorists. That's what these are." They also consider the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, as illegitimate.
Interesting. Well, President Donald Trump recently met with the NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte at the White House. They discussed the conflict in Ukraine, amongst a few other things. Well, the NATO chief was impressed with President Trump's actions in the region and voiced as much. Take a look at this next video on their meeting and what they had to say.
All right, just going to take you to this live event at the White House. We have Donald Trump there. He's at the moment sitting with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and they've been discussing the events in Ukraine.
Thank you so much for hosting again. And we were texting, I think it was on the day when you were in Israel and in Egypt, this tremendous success you had under your leadership, bringing peace to the Middle East. And then we texted each other and said, and the next big thing has to be Ukraine, Russia. And I want to help, NATO wants to help, my colleagues want to help to basically deliver on your vision of peace in Ukraine. And I really want to thank you for everything you're doing, including breaking the deadlock with Putin, starting the dialogue in February when you came in as president in January, but also for everything you did with NATO. The fact that we are now at this 5%, the huge success in The Hague at the NATO summit, the fact that Europeans are also stepping up when it comes to Ukraine, basically the weapons from the US being delivered to Ukraine, paid for by allies, and the Europeans coming together to discuss how can we sustain Ukraine post the peace deal. All of this is evidence of your leadership of pushing the Europeans and the Canadians to do more, to deliver, and to equalize in spending with the US. So on all of this, and today we will talk more on how we can really bring Ukraine to the next phase and get this terrible war, and all the bloodshed ended.
And as you know, we are going to be making a big trip next week. Some of you are going with us. We'll be going to Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan. In South Korea, I'll be meeting with President Xi of China. We'll have a pretty long meeting scheduled. We can work out a lot of our questions and our doubts and our tremendous assets together. So we look forward to that. I think something will work out. We have a very good relationship. But that'll be a big one. We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future.
Katan, the Secretary General of NATO, was really building up the president there. As you could see, all he had was great things to say. And you could kind of see President Trump did like all that little bit of flattery there.
Yeah, I bet he did.
Well, continuing on President Trump's fight against drug runners from Venezuela, the U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth ordered the largest aircraft carrier in not only the U.S. fleet, but the world to waters off the coast of Venezuela. But it's not just Venezuela. Colombia's president has had sanctions put on him by the U.S. Treasury. Now, more on this unfolding situation and the move of the U.S. in Latin America waters in this next video. Take a look.
President Trump is stepping up his war against illegal drugs on two fronts, military and economic.
On the military, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today ordered an aircraft carrier, the biggest one in the world, to waters off Venezuela, whose dictator is under indictment in the United States on drug trafficking charges.
And the U.S. Treasury imposed economic sanctions on the president of Colombia, who Mr. Trump calls an illegal drug leader.
Charlie D'Agata in Washington has more about the U.S. military buildup off of South America. Charlie?
Yeah, this is a major escalation which will dramatically surge the amount of ships, aircraft, and troops to the region, and there is no greater projection of U.S. military power than a carrier strike group. The deployment of the Ford aircraft carrier and its escorting warships to the Caribbean is the strongest signal yet the U.S. is preparing to widen its airstrike campaign in the region. With 10 strikes on suspected drug boats already, including one overnight that allegedly killed 6 narco-terrorists, the Trump administration has warned Venezuela and its cartels that striking land is next.
We will treat you like we have treated Al-Qaeda. We will find you, we will map your networks, we will hunt you down, and we will kill you.
The Navy's largest ship, the Ford is stocked with F-18 fighter jets, surveillance aircraft, helicopters, and 4,500 sailors. Already in the region are 8 other warships and 10,000 troops. Corey Shockey served on the National Security Council under George W. Bush.
Are they preparing for war?
The president was willing to strike the Iranian nuclear infrastructure. The president's been willing to make these strikes in both the Pacific and the Caribbean. So I don't think we should rule it out.
President Trump has made it clear he wants Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro removed from power with a $50 million reward for information leading to his arrest. Maduro has been holding his own drills with live fire exercises and recently warned his military has 5,000 Russian-made anti-aircraft missiles ready to fire.
Not war, not.
But overnight, he appealed for a peaceful resolution.
Just peace, forever, 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 peace forever.
President Trump this week said Maduro has offered concessions.
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to around with the United States.
Well, this week, the Trump administration started striking alleged drug boats off the coast of Colombia, too. Now, those new sanctions announced against its president, Gustavo Petro, and members of his family were imposed, the administration says, because he has allowed drug cartels to flourish and refused to stop it.
Yeah, now that's pretty impressive, you know, ordering the largest aircraft carrier in the world to that particular region, you know, pretty much in our neighbors to the south. It's making a pretty bold statement.
Right, and along with the accompanying vessels, that's quite a show of firepower in the region.
That's right. Well, new sanctions being applied to Russia to put pressure on the country to end the war in Ukraine. That's right, sanctions were put on 2 of Russia's largest oil producers, and these sanctions were put on the country due to what the U.S. Treasury Department called, quote, a lack of serious commitment to a peace process, end quote. Well, after what Russia or Ukraine called a strike on a kindergarten center, President Putin was overseeing a nuclear missile exercise.
Well, U.S. Secretary of State Mark Rubio and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had a heated conversation in which neither side reached an agreement, and Russia said fighting will continue until it receives concessions from Ukraine. Now, as Ukraine's President Zelensky has called on the U.S. to put more pressure on Russia to end the war, the U.S. implemented these latest round of sanctions targeting what they call Russia's war economy.
Interesting. Well, moving over from sanctions to the Middle East, we brought you news on a recent peace agreement between Israel and Hamas and the ceasefire that was initiated. Well, fears are looming that the ceasefire just won't hold as more smoke was seen rising over the Gaza skyline. Israeli military said that Hamas has already violated the agreement when they fired an anti-tank missile and gunfire towards Israeli troops in southern Gaza, killing 2 Israeli soldiers. And of course, Hamas does deny these allegations.
Well, Israel, in its usual fashion, fired an insane amount of firepower towards what they say was the area which was the source of the strikes. Now, of course, mostly civilians suffered the barrage of Israeli strikes, hitting a coffee shop and killing at least 23 people, including children. Now, Palestinians are asking, quote, where is Donald Trump in all of this? Now, the U.S. president has said that Hamas needs to disarm, as they agreed.
Well, since the deal has taken effect, several Palestinians have been killed by Israeli snipers for crossing the quote-unquote yellow line, where Israeli troops withdrew from that time period of the ceasefire. Now, that yellow line is unknown to many, and when it is unintentionally crossed, well, they're shot and killed by Israeli snipers. Since then, Israeli troops have been marking that line to make it clear to see. But the question now that's on a lot of people's mind is, How much aid will the Israeli military allow into the region to help those most in need? That was a big issue in the previous months because there was a lot of people needing aid, but the Israeli military was not allowing those hundreds and hundreds of trucks to get through.
Right. You would think that the Israelis would have clearly marked that line if they're going to take such a severe punishment for anyone crossing it, that it would clearly be known this is the line.
That's right.
Well, to close us out here for tonight's broadcast, we take it back to the conflict with Russia and Ukraine. Now, Ukrainian President Zelensky went to the UK to meet with the, quote, coalition of the willing, to once again garner support to put more pressure on Russia. Now, to see who he met with and what was accomplished, take a look at our last video.
Volodymyr Zelensky came to London after a week of highs and lows for the Ukrainian president and his closest European allies. He and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer agreed that Russia's President Vladimir Putin shows no intention of ending the war. And in discussions among the so-called coalition of the willing, some in person, some via video link, it was agreed to step up economic pressure on Russia while keeping Ukraine in the fight with more long-range missiles and air defenses.
Working with the US, this coalition is determined to go further than ever to ratchet up the pressure on Putin, from the battlefield to his war economy, because that is the only way to change his mind and push him back to the table.
Everything Putin does is an attempt to delay new forms of pressure. We must create in Russia a will to negotiate.
That meant keeping the pressure up, which hasn't always been the case. US President Donald Trump's decision a week ago to withhold long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles was a disappointment, though his decision to sanction Russia's oil industry came as a welcome surprise. And at a summit in Brussels on Thursday, there was a 19th package of EU sanctions on Russia, but no agreement to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's war effort. All of which left Volodymyr Zelensky no doubt hoping this London encounter would amount to more than talk. The coalition of the willing, as this meeting will now become, used to talk about the day after the war, about ways of securing the peace. They're more interested now, it seems, in keeping Ukraine in the fight, as the hopes of peace, it appears, recede. There were, as ever, strong words of support and ambition. And after his third meeting with King Charles this year, Zelensky is in no doubt of the esteem in which he and his country are held. But he needs a great deal more than that.
Well, Zelensky has definitely been making his rounds, to President Trump, of course, to the members of the UK, been calling out to NATO, everybody that he possibly can, because he really would like to put into this war. But Russia's really kind of standing their ground, saying that, hey, Ukraine needs to give us some concessions before we turn away and put a stop to this war. President Trump is really pushing to bring an end to this thing, and he's not very pleased because Putin, even though meeting with him on several occasions, he's not, really budging off of his seat on this topic.
Right, and all the support that these other countries are giving to Ukraine is really continuing this war,
Right.
pushing it even forward. So, it's kind of it needs to be a little bit more of a give and take. If they would stop giving all those weapons to Ukraine, they might be forced to negotiate a little bit, and possibly they could come to a resolution and actually stop the war.
That's right. Well, if you'd like to learn more about how you can actually work to bring a peaceful solution in your life and the life of your family, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do contact the House of Yahweh, of course, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. Call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them by going to any of their websites at yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. If you'd like to, you can visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you'd like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, please go and check out the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com And check out the Ask Yisrael program by going to askyisrael.com.
All right, well, don't go anywhere, because up next is another classic sermon by Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thanks for watching.